Good afternoon. Buenos tardes, lovely people. Welcome, my Woman of Worth podcast community, to those who are watching live, and welcome to those who are watching on the replay. I am your host, Lady Aura. And without further ado, today I'll be talking about reflective thinking and intrapersonal intelligence. According to Howard Gardner, a psychologist, his theory looked at not just one intelligence but multiple intelligence, which includes intrapersonal intelligence and interpersonal intelligence, of which some of us innately has a higher intrapersonal intelligence. Now, those two intelligence that I made mention of are just two of about 7 that Howard Gardner looked at. So the other 5, I'm allowing you to do your research and leave me a comment later and let me know what were some of them that you researched and learned or find out about. Yeah? Now, this intelligence speaks to how well an individual knows themselves and how well we understand ourselves. So that's what that's intrapersonal. Let me just separate it here. Intrapersonal. So though I made mention of 2 of the multiple or 7 intelligence that Howard Gardner looked at, of the 2 that I made mention of the 7, I will be zooming in on just one, which is the intrapersonal intelligence. Yeah? And this speaks to how well we know ourselves. How aware are we of ourselves? How well do we understand our feelings or emotions? And how well do we know, understand, and are able to identify our weaknesses and our strengths? Yes? Now, before I go further into today's informative, provocative, and inspiring lesson or message, I want to share a little bit about a course that I did, or one of the courses that I did in one of the semesters gone, right? But before going into doing the course, I remember upon being qualified to begin my degree at the University of the West Indies, there is something that is required of us depending on what it is that you're studying. So for my field or my faculty, what I was to do, there was a requirement whereby I had to, including other students, who had to have either a grade 1 in English language, and if you did not have a grade 1, you would have to do an English language test. It's called ELTP test, I think. And with that test, it is necessary or was necessary to sit in order to progress into the degree, right? And initially I was thinking to myself, why do I need to do this test? I got a 2. You know, it's not like I had failed my CXC. It was CXC that I did at the time, which is now known as CSEC. I did my CXC exam and got a grade 2, and I was thinking, this is not so bad. So, you know, this is actually a good mark. So why do I need to do this? What people don't think that we can read and write and all these things? That was just how I was thinking, right? And nonetheless, it was a requirement, so I had no choice. I had to do the test, and of course, I passed. So in passing the test, I was able to matriculate to the next stage of my studies, right? Now, to fast forward a bit, there is a course that I did that speaks to critical writing and reading. And in that course, it did not only teach us, for those who would have sat that course, it did not only teach us how to be critical readers and critical writers or critical thinkers, but it also taught us, or taught me, something very important about reflection or reflective thinking or reflective writing. Yeah? And I already understood to a degree the importance of reflecting, but I learned something else later down the road which was very important. So of course, after doing that course, looking back, which was reflecting on when I was about to start the degree program at university, when I look back, I was like, wow, now I see why it was necessary for me to do that exam prior to the course. And there was so much that I learned, of course, in that course, and so much that of what I knew already, that I was better able to, how should I say, improve on. Yeah. So I was so appreciative of the course later, right? One of the other things that I want to share is that years ago, I remember a girlfriend of mine, we were, I think it was at my home, yes, and we were just there talking and laughing, and I don't even remember the full thing about, how we ended up talking about, my response, my triggers, and I don't remember her exact words, but it was somewhere along the lines of, or you have to, sit with yourself and go deep and find out where are you responding from or reacting from, why are you so easily offended or defensive, somewhere along that line. And she was saying something like, you need to sit with that little girl who needs to be acknowledged in finding out, what happened when you were a child that caused you to respond or react the way that you do now as an adult. So she came and she would do like a little dramatization, and she would knock on the door pretending as though she is the little girl, that little girl, me, that I did not face or address at the time then. And so she would knock and say, pretend like she's the little girl who is saying, hello, I'm here, you need to talk with me, you need to sit with me, you need to pay attention to me, you need to understand what's happening with me, or what is it that is to be addressed that was not addressed. And what she was saying also is that if I don't attend to that area, what will happen is each time I find myself in a particular position in a conversation with someone or something of that nature, and something is being triggered, what will happen, instead of me understanding what is taking place and maturely handle the situation, what will happen is I'll keep reacting, because every time the trigger is triggered, I'm gonna react, in a particular manner, in an aggressive manner, an offensive manner, a defensive manner, something like that, right? Now, I tried to pay attention to that little girl, to, go deep within to find out what's happening, but I don't think I had reached far with that. I'm not sure why. Maybe it is that I had a struggle in understanding really how to do that, or maybe it is that I did not sit long enough in the process to fully understanding it at the time. And maybe too, because I'm someone who is always on the go, so therefore, if sometimes I start doing something, if I'm not making the effort, or I'm not aware in what's happening, I could just find myself just start moving to get other stuff done. So those could have been one of the reasons why at the time. So of course, a few years later, all of what she was dramatizing replayed later on in a relationship, right? And in it replaying is like my mind took me back to that evening of her dramatizing what's happening if, or what will happen if I don't attend to that little girl who is crying out for some attention, to see what's happening with her, why she's so aggressive and stuff like that, right? So when that happened, I was like, oh wow, this is what my girlfriend at the time was talking about. But what I want to make mention here sometimes is not to be too hard on yourself. If in the moment you don't fully get the thing, if you're trying to do something and at the first try, the second try, the third try, you failed at it, it does not mean that you should give up. Keep trying until you master that thing. Yeah? And so, with that said, I'm just trying to remember here. I remember I used to be so easily offended or defensive in my responses in that relationship, in the earlier stages of the relationship, right? And I did not understand at the time, but it was not until years later I started paying attention to the triggers. I started paying attention to my response or my reaction. I started paying attention to my tone and language. I started paying attention to my whole behavior, my whole attitude. And I still do those things, by the way. I still assess my attitude, my language, and my mindset or my thoughts. I still do that because I'm actively, always actively pursuing the best version of myself, and you should too. That's why I'm here, so to encourage you to know that you can and should always pursue the best version of yourself. Yeah? So in doing that, I remember one day I left a family member's home, and upon leaving the family member's home, that was when tears just started flowing from my eyes. That's when the connection was made. That was when I recognized why I am, or why I was so easily offended, why I was so easily triggered, why I was so easily defensive. It's because of a trait that I have inherited or had inherited, throughout the family lineage. Yeah? And so I was like saying to myself, oh my God, mind you, there are some great qualities and value system in the family lineage. But there was this one thing in particular, when I recognized it, I identified it, and I was weeping because I was saying to myself, I don't like this. And then I started to think to myself, this is why, or this was why I was so easily offensive, defensive, and that kind of a thing. It's because I've inherited it. But the thing with that is, it was not benefiting me in any good way. It was not increasing me in any way. It was not adding value to me. It was actually like taking away, because if something happens and I'm not comfortable, or I don't like it, or something like that, what will happen is that if I carry this trait into relationships, spousal relationships, or even friendships, sometimes we can take some of these things in our friendships. If I'm not careful, or if we're not careful, our friendships or spousal relationships could actually end prematurely. So we have to be so mindful of these things. Yeah? And I was eager, I was driven, and I just wanted to be the best version of myself. So when I recognized what was happening, I had to pray too and ask God to sever those traits that does not add value to me, those things that does not, it's not it won't be fruitful in where I'm going. It's not a part of where I'm going. So I needed to sever the ties with these things. And so I had to pray. And I still pray, you know, because sometimes there are some other traits that we've inherited that we need to cut ties with, that we've inherited, you know, in our families. And so I prayed about that thing. And then, to be honest too, I started becoming more aware of my response, my action, my attitude, my tone, and my language. Like I said, I still do try to pay best attention to those things. And should in the case I miss it on the spot, I guarantee you, when I leave that conversation, when I leave that situation, when I leave the presence of that individual, I will either go and sit quietly with myself, or when I get home, if I'm not home, if I'm at work, if I'm at school, if I'm at church, wherever I may be, if I experience something or come across a situation or an individual and, you know, it was just not something so pleasant, if I don't take the opportunity in the moment to reflect, which sometimes I do, oftentimes I do, if I don't get that opportunity to really focus on it, when I get home, I guarantee you I'll definitely be reflecting on what it is and be praying about it too. Yeah? And so that's what reflecting has done for me. That's how it has helped me. And from I've known myself, I've always tried to reflect or introspect. But of course, there were some areas that I had fallen short. Where I had fallen short, which is a weakness, as I made mention, when you have the intrapersonal intelligence, you understand your weaknesses and your strengths. And some of us are innately higher than others. But, just hold on to that but there. Reflecting enables us to assess, evaluate, introspect, or analyze ourselves and the situation to see where or what area we can possibly improve. So remember, I just made mention that if I'm in a situation, a conversation, if there's something that I've experienced that seems to be a bit unpleasant or uncomfortable, you know, I evaluate it, I assess it, I introspect, I analyze both myself and the situation, and to some degree the individual. But I try to focus mainly on myself so that I can improve myself, because I cannot change the individual, neither can you change any individual. So we should always aim to work on ourselves and improve ourselves, right? So in doing that, it enables me to be able to see the weaknesses and to work on them, and where the strengths are, to progressively or continually improve those areas, those strengths as well. Yeah? And as you should all know by now, I love to talk about introspection. I love to talk about analyzing, evaluating, and assessing ourselves. Excuse me. And the reason for doing this is that it adds value. Value. Yes, reflecting adds value. You may already possess this quality of reflecting, but should you not, you are in the right place, as you can develop this skill to become intrapersonal intelligence. It's not too late. So if you did not naturally possess this type or form of intelligence, you can grab a hold of it. You may be asking the question, how how can I develop this great quality? How? By reflecting. Yes. Why reflecting? Because it can increase your value and it can activate several other things. What several other things, you may ask? Those several other things may be or could be interpersonal intelligence. What that means is when we are intrapersonal intelligence, or when we have the intrapersonal intelligence, which means, again, when we are aware of our emotions or feelings, when we understand them, when we know ourselves well enough to understand our weaknesses and our strengths, when we have control over those areas, over those things, then we'll be better able to manage them, or emotions. So for example, if we're if we're experiencing something, or we're having a conversation or something like that with an individual or with individuals, when we are fully aware, or we understand ourselves, should we be in that kind of a position, we'll be better able to respond, react, or even our tone and our language and our attitude will be different, or will be better. So therefore, we'll be able to deal with individuals better than we used to. We'll be able to be in the presence of others in a particular situation, and though it may be uncomfortable, depending on to what degree, of course, excuse me, we'll be able to, socialize better, for a simpler way or a simpler term. Another way or another thing that could be activated through reflecting is the awareness of our emotions and our feelings. Being aware of our emotions and feelings will mean we're better able to excuse me, control our anger. We're better able to control that, in the sense that if something is said that we did not like, that was unfair, unjust, or uncomfortable, whether said or displayed, when we are aware of our feelings and emotions, rather than being easily angered, we'll be slow to wrath, slow to speak, or may not even speak at all. Yeah? So this is what I mean by when I say reflecting can add value, or it holds great value. Another thing that reflecting activates is your decision making. What do I mean by this? When we reflect, we'll be better able to make better choices. So when it comes to making a decision, rather than just jumping to make any and any decision, and of course depending on the situation, sometimes we may have to make decisions on the spot, but for things that we don't necessarily need to just jump at, when we reflect and we understand ourselves well enough, we'll know that the choices we make, we'll know that the ones that we're making, they are either for good, of great benefit, or if they will be of great loss, or if they will be decisions that we're making that will cause more harm than good. Yeah? Another thing that reflecting can activate is problem solving skills. Similarly to decision making, when we reflect, we become better at problem solving. So rather than becoming frustrated easily, or giving up easily, or seeing the challenge as something that's about to bury us. When we reflect, we'll be better able to project for the future. So what that means is, when we would have experienced something, whether something that was done, something was said, and things like that, when we reflect, we would have had all the different factors, we'd have had all the different reactions, responses, the different parties that plays a part into the experience. We would have had all those things available in the experience. Looking back at the experience, we can pull from it and say, okay, when I experienced this, or when that was said, it did not yield any good fruit when we attempted to do things this particular way. But when we attempted to do it this way, it yielded better results. It was more fruitful. So should I, or should we be faced with problems, we'll be better able to solve them. Make sense? And of course, every problem is different, but our challenge is different, but we can use the same principle in how we project for the future. And I'm talking to myself too, right? I'm not just talking to you lovely people, I'm also talking to myself, right? Another thing that reflecting can activate is improving ourselves. And this is the bombshell. This is the most exciting, most powerful thing of them all for me, because that is what I'm all about, improving myself and sharing with you lovely Woman of Worth community how you too can improve yourself and become the best version. That is my aim, that is my mission, that is my goal, that is my objective, to help you so that you can recognize that you too can improve yourself and walk into your value and your victory. There's so much value that is upon you, but sometimes we fall short in not knowing it, in not seeing it, in not understanding. So that's another thing. If we don't understand ourselves well enough, if we don't know ourselves well enough, then how can we understand or see or know the value that is within us? I struggled with this at a point. I did not have it all together, though I liked or always tried my best to introspect or evaluate or to reflect. I fell short in some way or another. But as the years go by, I kept improving, and I still am improving. So it does add value to you. So hear me while I'm talking to you, right? And it breaks the heart of many when sometimes, especially those who love us and care for us, it breaks their heart when they see that there is so much value, so much worth, so much potential, so many great things that we possess, and we are not possessing them, we are not obtaining them, we are not walking in them, we are not walking them out, we are not living in them, we are not living them out. It breaks the heart of those who love us and care for us when we are not making the effort to do as much as we can to improve and to do better for ourselves. So it is important to do that, because as I made mention earlier, when we fail to do these things, sometimes it may break relationships. So we got to be careful about that one. So I'm about to close. I'm so glad that I did not jinx myself today, because every week I said I'm going to be short and quick, and it happens that I go longer sometimes. It's just how the message has to be delivered, and sometimes it's just my heart just being poured out to you because I want to see you walk in value and victory. So today it's been really short, yeah? And I'm sure you must be happy. I'm glad I didn't say it at the beginning. Anyhow, My closing remarks to you today is, may I suggest Psalm 4 verse 4. And it reads, stand in awe and sin not. Commune with your own heart upon your bed and be still. So remember earlier I talked about sometimes when we learn to, or when we actively reflect and pursue the best version of ourselves, when we do these things sometimes in reflecting, and we find ourselves in our position, rather than reacting or responding, sometimes we may be slow to speak or we may not even say anything. Yeah, so I'm going somewhere at the end of this. Yeah, so what this verse is saying, in other words, is that we should meditate, we should reflect on our beds, reflect on our deepest feelings, reflect on our deepest emotions, reflect on our deepest thoughts, reflect on the things that we experienced that were not so pleasant, that maybe caused us to become angry. We ought to reflect on those things, and in reflecting on them, in meditating on them, commune with our heart. In other words, we ought to go deep inside and see, why did I feel this way? What caused me to respond, react, or behave in the manner in which I did? Yeah? When we do this, again, it enables us to walk in so much value. So this is what this is saying that we should do. Because when we do these things, we'll be less likely to respond angrily, yeah, or easily offended or defensive and things like that, right? And talk to God about those deep feelings, those deep emotions, those deep hurt. Talk about them. And should you become angry, should you have reacted or responded or behaved angrily or spoken with anger, you have an opportunity to lie on your bed just before you go to sleep, even if you choose throughout the day. Once you're able to do it, talk with God. Let Him know the deep hurt, the deep feelings, the deep emotions that you feel from what you experienced, and let Him know that if you felt it this way, you did not like how it made you feel, or perhaps you did not like how you reacted or responded or thought about the whole thing. So you have the opportunity to talk with God about it and to get it right, and to talk with yourself and to get it right. You have that opportunity. Yeah. And also, may I suggest that you journal your experiences. This too is a way of reflecting. It is a way of reflecting. I've made mention about journaling in previous posts, and this very same girlfriend that I talk about, when she told me about journaling, I've heard it many times. You too may have heard it and you have not yet acted upon it, or maybe you have, but you fail to be consistent, or you probably just do it a few times and think it doesn't make sense. Let me tell you, it makes a whole lot of sense. I've heard it, but I wasn't actively doing it, nor did I fully understand the purpose of it. So here I'm letting you know, should you have not yet recognized, identify, or understand the purpose of journaling, you're able to reflect. Reflecting, when you write, you're able to look back at what you wrote, how you were feeling, how you were thinking, and what you experienced at the time. When you look back at it, you may be at a place where you're more mature emotionally, spiritually, mentally, physically, psychologically, financially, you name it. When you look back, you could see, wow, I have grown, I have improved I have developed because I no longer respond or react or speak or think like that. Yeah? So it is very imperative to reflect and to do so in journaling. And it doesn't have to always be something negative, by the way, when you journal. It could also mean something positive. Maybe it's something that you desire to be, to do, or become. And when you reflect, when you journal rather, and you look back at that which you had written in your journal, when you are now walking in the manifestation of those things that you had desired, that you wanted to do, say, or become, when you find yourself now walking into those manifestations, you will be celebrating yourself, or you'll be so proud of yourself to see that you had written all these things, and now you are walking into your manifestations, or you are about to. I have done that, and I have looked back and seen so many things at once, and looking back and thinking, wow, at one point, my God, wow, this was where I was at. And when I look back at some of my other journals, when I look at it, I was like, wow, I was writing some of these things and didn't even know that I was like practically prophesying to myself through my journaling in where I am today. And this where I am at today is a part of my journaling and where I am about to go. So know today that reflective thinking and intrapersonal intelligence can go hand in hand. Reflect today so that you can add value to your life, improve yourself, grow and develop to walk in your victory and your value. Have yourself a great weekend of what is left. Remember, I love you, but God loves you more. Shalom. Bye-bye.